Successful migrations are engineered long before the first byte moves. Imagine this. You're about to migrate a file server. You open the statistics, 10 terabytes. Perfect. You measure the bandwidth, you run a proof of concept, everything looks great, you calculate the ETA, you confidently click start. A week later, you look at the destination, it already contains 80 terabytes, and somehow the migration isn't even halfway done. How? Or maybe your scan reports 2 million files. The migration completes successfully. The report proudly says 1.5 million files transferred. Congratulations! Except, where did the other 500,000 files go? Or perhaps you had 3 completely separate folders. After the migration, they still exist, only now they all contain exactly the same data. Those sound ridiculous? Every single one of these situations happened to me. Real customers, real production environments, real panic. Now, here's the surprising part. None of those projects failed because of the migration software. The migration simply exposed problems that existed for years. That's the biggest lesson I've learned after spending a decade designing and executing enterprise migration projects. People think migrations move data. They don't. They reveal data. This entire series is about learning how to think like a migration engineer, not just learning how to click buttons, because software changes every year. The principles don't. And the very first principle is Migration Rule 1. Never migrate data you have not interrogated, you haven't understood. Ask difficult questions. Assume nothing, because every assumption you make before a migration eventually turns into an incident ticket. Today, we're going to become detectives. Every migration begins with questions. When I start a migration today, I'm not asking, what software are we going to use? I ask, where? How much? How many? Who owns it? Should it even exist? What lies to me? And what is going to break? Those questions sound simple. They are not. Let's start with the first one. Where is the data? Organizations almost never have one storage repository. There are local servers, network shares, NAS devices, Dropbox, Google Drive, OneDrive, Box, Ignite, department file servers, old archive servers nobody dares switch off. Sometimes all of those at once. Every one of those repositories is its own migration. Different permissions, different APIs, different bandwidth, different limitations, different users. Treat them separately. I have seen customers expose 10 completely different repositories as one giant drive using DFS namespaces, or mount cloud repositories into folders. Looks beautiful until something fails. Now, you don't know which backend is actually responsible. You lose separation of concerns. You lose visibility. You lose sanity. Split migrations into manageable silos. Future you will think present you. Question 2. How fast can the data actually move? People love running speed tests. I don't care. Speed test tells you how quickly you can reach some server on the internet. I care about how quickly you can reach your destination. Those are two completely different things. Measure your network adapter, your LAN, your WAN, and finally, your actual destination. Every hop may become the bottleneck. Now let's make this even more fun. Suppose your destination is a hybrid cloud NAS, something like Nasuni or Panzura. You copy a few gigabytes, everything screams. Fantastic throughput, looks amazing. Then, after a few hours, performance falls to a cliff. Nothing changed except one thing. The cache filled up. I've spent days troubleshooting environments like this. The filers looked perfectly healthy. CPU was fine. Memory was fine. Network was fine. Only later did we realize that all our benchmarks had accidentally targeted data that was already cached. Brand new data had to travel all the way to the object storage. Completely different performance profile. In some environments, I actually ended up writing cache warming scripts before the migration even started, just to prepare the appliances. Sometimes for data ingress, sometimes for data egress. Writing directly to the backend storage? to the object storage? Unfortunately, that's not an option. Those systems often chunk, encrypt, or deduplicate data internally. The object store isn't a file system, it's a database. If possible, spin up dedicated cloud filers close to the object storage itself. You'll often gain much more than throwing hardware at the problem. And remember one more thing. Production servers have users. Your migration does not own the server. If people complain every morning that opening Excel takes 30 seconds because your migration is consuming all available input-output, guess whose project suddenly becomes everyone's priority? Sometimes slowing your migration down during working hours actually finishes the project sooner. Question 3. How much data is there? Volume determines budget. Volume determines ETA. Volume determines storage cost. Volume determines validation effort. Simple. Or is it? Do not blindly trust storage statistics. I once spent hours investigating a discrepancy between source and destination. Eventually, I discovered both systems were technically correct. One reported decimal terabytes, the other binary tebibytes. The numbers looked wrong. The math wasn't. Use bandwidth calculators. Estimate your timelines. But remember, those estimates assume unlimited transfer. Many providers disagree. Google Drive currently limits upload to roughly 750 gigabytes per user per rolling day. OneDrive and SharePoint don't impose the fixed daily limit. Instead, they dynamically throttle you depending on the server load and request cost. Ignite throttles API usage per user per registered application. Fortunately, their support team can sometimes increase those limits. Ignite also limits FTP and WebDAV transfers to 500 gigabytes per day. Good luck migrating 50 terabytes that way. Object storage providers like AWS S3, Azure Blob Storage, Google Cloud Storage generally don't throttle uploads the same way. Instead, they charge you. Every request, every operation, sometimes every list. Understanding those rules before starting a migration can literally save weeks. Question 4. How many objects? This one surprises almost everybody. 10 terabytes tells me almost nothing. 20 million files tells me everything. Imagine two datasets. One contains 20 500 gigabyte video files. The other contains 30 million tiny laboratory measurements. Same storage, completely different migration. Every object has to be discovered, read, transferred, validated, indexed, sometimes chunked, sometimes versioned, sometimes scanned, sometimes encrypted, sometimes uploaded in dozens of separate API requests. Object count usually matters more than storage size. I once worked with several biopharma companies whose laboratory equipment continuously produced microscopic result files. Hundreds of thousands, millions, individual folders containing unimaginable numbers of tiny objects. Storage wasn't the problem, the number of objects was. Every migration tool slowed down, because physics eventually wins. Question 5. Should this data even exist? The cheapest data to migrate is the data you never migrate. Ask departments, project owners. Ask legal. Ask compliance. What is still active? What is archival? What's duplicated? What can disappear forever? Sometimes people find it easier to identify what they still need instead of what they don't. That's perfectly fine. Every folder you eliminate reduces bandwidth, storage costs, project duration, validation effort, backup cost, future complexity. Then there are temporary files, caches, recycle bins, office log files, operating system metadata. Those usually don't belong in the destination either. Duplicate data deserves special attention. I have seen users copy the same company logo into every single project, the same template folder, the same installation media, again and again and again. Sometimes the migration project itself becomes an opportunity to educate users. Not every problem should be solved with software. Some should be solved with better habits. Question 6. What lies to you? This is where migration becomes dangerous. Shortcuts, aliases, symbolic links, hard links, DFS namespaces, shared folders. All of them can completely change what your migration tool actually sees. One of my earliest surprises came from Dropbox. The migration software had an innocent little checkbox, include data shared with me. It was enabled by default. The customer had approximately 10 terabytes. By the time we noticed, we were already approaching 100 terabytes. Nothing had duplicated accidentally. We had simply migrated every shared folder once for every participant. Another customer used DFS namespaces. Everything looked like one clean hierarchy. Underneath, multiple servers, multiple references, multiple paths leading to the same data. Hard junctions cause exactly the same issues. Different paths, same physical data. If your migration tool follows every path independently, congratulations! You just duplicated your migration. Cloud storage introduces another variation. I once found an organization where the company folder technically belonged to an employee who had left years earlier. Hundreds of users still collaborated inside that person's Dropbox. Nobody knew. These situations are surprisingly common. We'll dedicate an entire episode just to links and references, because this topic alone can make or break a migration. Question 7. What will break? Every storage platform has rules. Some are obvious, some are ridiculous. Some only appear after 3 days of copying. Maximum file sizes, maximum path names, forbidden characters, Unicode restrictions, leading periods, trailing spaces, reserved names, maximum numbers of children inside a folder, timestamp validation, Office metadata. The list goes on. Windows doesn't like characters like these. Some providers reject characters that Windows happily lives with. Others reject Unicode characters above a certain byte length, or control characters. Did you know that backspace can be a character? Control characters create headaches mostly cause you cannot see them. Some reject timestamps from the future. Yes, I have seen files from the future. Laboratory equipment, camera firmware, broken scripts, you name it. Email archiving software deserves special mention. Many products simply take the email subject line and turn it into the file name. Wonderful idea. Until users start writing novels in their subject line or add 10 emojis. Suddenly, every archived email becomes a file name too long for the destination. Migration tools sometimes try to help. They silently rename files, replace characters, trim names. Sounds useful until 2 different files become identical after normalization. And now they merge or overwrite each other. I once lost data during a 100 terabyte migration from Box because multiple folders with exactly the same name existed in the same location. The source allowed it. The destination merged them. The migration completed successfully. The data didn't. Even Office documents can sometimes surprise you. SharePoint and OneDrive enrich Office files with cloud-specific metadata. Perfectly legitimate. But suddenly your hash comparison says every migrated document changed. Did corruption occur? Usually not. The platform simply modified the file. Knowing these behaviors beforehand completely changes how you validate a migration. So, this is why migrations fail. Notice something interesting? Not once did we blame the migration software. The software simply followed instructions. The problems already existed. Duplicates, broken file names, hidden links, unexpected ownership, provider limitations, invalid metadata, unrealistic expectations. The migration simply forced us to finally notice them. Every migration is a data audit disguised as a copy job. The better you audit, the smoother your migration. Where tools come in. Everything we've discussed today can be discovered manually, eventually, or you can automate as much of the investigation as possible. This is exactly why I built Migrate Cloud. Before copying anything, it scans repositories, reports storage volume, object counts, duplicate data, recently modified files, temporary files. It gives you potential filtering opportunities. It discovers naming issues, provider limitations, and allows you to solve many of the problems that we discussed today. Not because scanning is exciting, but because informed migrations are successful migrations. So this episode wasn't really about moving data. It was about changing the way you think about data. Because once you start asking the right questions, the migration itself becomes much less mysterious. In the next episode, we'll move to the other side of the equation, preparing the destination. How do you prepare user identities, permissions, collaboration, search indexing, applications, and all the invisible infrastructure people forget until after cutover. Because a successful migration doesn't end when the last file is copied. That's actually when the real work begins. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.